They say control brings stability, that the more you manage, the safer your world becomes. But what if control is not safety, but fear, wearing the mask of certainty? You see it in the smallest moments, the need to plan everything, to anticipate every outcome, to hold the world so tightly that nothing slips through. But beneath that careful grip, something trembles. Why does uncertainty feel so unbearable? Why does letting go feel like losing everything? This isn't about being organized or responsible. It's about something quieter, something deeper, a silent tension that rarely gets named. In this film, you'll explore what control is really protecting and what it might be quietly taking away. Let's begin.
At first glance, control doesn't look like fear. It looks like discipline, like responsibility, like someone who has their life together. You plan ahead, you think things through, you prepare for outcomes others don't even consider. And from the outside, it feels admirable, even enviable. But beneath that careful structure, something else quietly hums. A tension, a need. Because control is not just about managing life, it's about preventing something undefined yet deeply felt. What happens if things don't go as planned? What if something slips through? What if you're not ready? These questions don't always appear as thoughts. Sometimes they exist as a feeling in the body, a restlessness, a subtle unease when things are uncertain, like standing on ground that doesn't feel entirely solid. So control becomes the ground. You organize, you anticipate, you try to close every open loop, not because you want to dominate life, but because unpredictability feels like a quiet threat. And for a moment, it works. There's relief in knowing what comes next, comfort in having answers, a sense of calm when everything is handled. But it doesn't last, because life doesn't stay still. Plans shift, people change, outcomes refuse to obey. And when they do, that same unease returns, sometimes stronger, sometimes louder. So you tighten your grip, not realizing that the safety you're creating is also the cage you're living in. Control rarely begins in the present moment. It has a history, a quiet origin that often goes unnoticed. Long before it became a habit, it was a response. Sometimes it begins in environments where things felt unpredictable, where emotions shifted without warning, where safety wasn't something you could rely on, but something you had to figure out. Maybe it was inconsistency, maybe it was chaos, or maybe it was something quieter, being misunderstood, unseen, or emotionally alone. When a child grows in a space where the world feels unstable, the mind begins to search for patterns, for ways to make sense of what cannot be controlled. And slowly something forms. If I can predict it, maybe I can survive it. If I can manage it, maybe it won't hurt me. So you start paying attention to tone, to timing, to subtle shifts in people's behavior. You learn to anticipate before things happen, not because you wanted control, but because you needed safety. And over time, that survival strategy becomes identity. You become the one who has it together, the one who plans, the one who fixes, the one who holds things steady when everything else feels uncertain. But what once protected you doesn't always evolve with you. Because even when the environment changes, the body remembers. The mind still scans for what could go wrong, still tries to stay one step ahead of pain that may no longer be there. And so control continues, not as a conscious choice, but as an echo of something older, something that once made perfect sense. Uncertainty is not just uncomfortable. To the brain, it can feel like danger. Deep inside, there is a system designed to keep you safe. It scans for threats, predicts outcomes, and prepares you for what might go wrong. And when something cannot be predicted, that system becomes alert. because the unknown has no boundaries, no clear ending, no guarantee. So the brain begins to fill in the gaps. What if something goes wrong? What if I'm not prepared? What if I lose control completely? These aren't just thoughts, they are signals, tiny alarms echoing through the body. Your heart may beat faster, your mind may race ahead, your body may feel restless like it's bracing for something that hasn't even happened. And in that moment, control feels like relief. Planning reduces the unknown, structure creates predictability, decisions bring a sense of closure. It soothes the system, temporarily. But here's the quiet paradox. The more you rely on control to calm uncertainty, the less tolerance you build for the unknown itself. So even small unpredictability begins to feel overwhelming. Even minor disruptions feel like something is slipping out of place, and slowly the threshold shrinks. What once felt manageable now feels urgent. What once felt uncertain now feels unsafe. Not because life has become more dangerous, but because the mind has learned that certainty is the only place where it can rest, and anything outside of that feels like a risk.
Control asks for more than it seems. At first, it feels like effort. Then it becomes responsibility. And eventually, it becomes weight. Because to control everything, you have to think about everything. Every possibility, every outcome, every small detail that could go wrong. Your mind rarely rests. It moves ahead of the present, constantly preparing, adjusting, calculating. Even in moments that are meant to feel calm, something is still running in the background. A quiet checklist, an invisible pressure. And over time, it becomes exhausting. Not the kind of exhaustion that sleep can fix, but the kind that lingers, that sits in your chest, that follows you even when nothing is happening. There's also a loneliness to it, because when you feel responsible for keeping everything steady, it becomes hard to trust others, hard to let people take the lead, hard to believe that things will be okay without your constant involvement. So you carry more. Not always because you want to, but because letting go feels riskier than holding on. And yet there are moments, small, almost unnoticeable, when you feel the strain of it all. A quiet thought. What would it feel like to not have to manage everything? But that thought rarely stays, because almost immediately another one follows. If I don't, who will? And just like that, the cycle continues. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that slowly drains something essential while convincing you it's necessary.
Letting go sounds simple, until it isn't. Because for someone who has learned to rely on control, letting go doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like exposure, like standing without armor, like stepping into something undefined, without knowing how it will end. And beneath that hesitation, there is often a quiet fear, not always of failure, but of what might surface in the absence of control. What if things fall apart? What if someone disappoints you? What if you're left to face emotions you've been carefully managing all along? Control doesn't just organize the outside world, it regulates the inside one too. It keeps certain feelings contained, keeps uncertainty at a distance, keeps vulnerability from becoming overwhelming. So when the idea of letting go appears, the mind resists, not because it doesn't want peace, but because it associates release with chaos, and chaos feels dangerous. There's also something deeper, a quiet belief that control equals responsibility, that if you stop managing everything, something important will be lost, or worse, that it will somehow be your fault. So you hold on, even when it's tiring, even when it's heavy, because control has never just been about outcomes. It has been about protection. And letting go feels like removing something that once kept you safe, even if that safety now comes at a cost. There is a version of strength that rarely gets noticed. It doesn't plan every outcome. It doesn't anticipate every possibility. It doesn't hold the world together with constant effort. It simply
allows. Not because it is careless, but because it understands something deeper, that life has never been fully controllable, and maybe it was never meant to be. For so long, control may have felt like power, like responsibility, like the only way to keep things from falling apart. But real strength begins to look different over time. It looks like sitting with a question without rushing to answer it, like allowing moments to unfold without tightening around them, like trusting that not everything needs to be predicted to be survived. And perhaps even more quietly, it looks like allowing yourself to feel. Because beneath the need for control, there has always been something human, a need for safety, a desire for stability, a fear of losing what matters. None of that is wrong, but carrying it alone, holding everything together without pause, slowly takes something from you. And maybe strength is not found in holding everything perfectly in place. Maybe it is found in knowing you don't have to. That things can be uncertain and still be okay. That you can loosen your grip and still remain whole. Not because the world becomes predictable, but because you no longer need it to be. If this reflection felt familiar, if something quiet inside you softened even just a little, then maybe you've been carrying more than you realized, and maybe you're not alone in that. There are so many people moving through life with the same quiet tension, holding things together, managing, anticipating, trying to keep everything from slipping. Not because they want control, but because at some point it felt necessary. If this space gave words to something you've never quite been able to explain, you're allowed to sit with that, gently. And if you'd like to stay connected to reflections like this, to a space that explores the hidden corners of the human mind and the emotions we rarely speak about, you're always welcome here. If you feel comfortable, you can share your thoughts below, not because you have to, but because sometimes your words might help someone else feel a little less alone. Take care of yourself.